How do you throw your own father out of a $740,000 country house and still end the day standing on the street yourself? I had just signed the deed over to my son when he pointed to the door and told me he never wanted to see me there again. By that evening, after one quiet visit to the land office with my lawyer, the house was back in my name, and my son finally learned who really controlled the keys to his new home. Before we continue, we ask you to hit the hype button, subscribe, and like the video to help the channel grow. Tell us which city you are from in the comments. We would like to get to know our audience better. The morning started the way most mornings at the country house did. I made coffee in the kitchen while sunlight came through the big windows that looked out over 3 acres of grass and woods. The place was quiet except for the coffee maker and the sound of birds outside. I walked through the living room, ran my hand along the back of the couch I bought 12 years ago, and looked at the wooden beams in the ceiling that I helped install when the contractor said they would cost too much if he did it alone. Every corner of this house had a story. Every bill had come from my business, the bars, the event venues, the late nights when I was the last one to lock up and count the register. I built an entertainment and hospitality company from nothing, 1 liquor license and 1 lease at a time. And this house, this quiet place in the country, an hour from the city, was supposed to be the proof that it all meant something. I heard the car before I saw it. Brend's black SUV came up the gravel drive too fast, kicking up dust and making noise. He always drove like that, like he was in a commercial. The engine shut off, and I heard 2 doors slam. My son and his wife, Nora, came up the porch steps carrying nothing but their phones and a tablet. "Hey, Dad," Brend said as he walked in without knocking. He was 31, but dressed like he thought he was 25, wearing a brand-name jacket and shoes that cost more than I used to spend on rent. Nora followed him, already looking around the living room with the expression she always had, like she was judging whether the place was good enough to post about. "Long drive," she said, not really to me. "We need to talk about getting better Wi-Fi out here. This is painful." I poured them coffee. Brend sat at the dining table and stretched out like he owned the place, which in a few minutes he would. "So," he said, pulling the tablet closer. "You ready to do this?" I nodded. We had talked about this for months. Brend kept bringing up how hard it was for people his age to get stability, how the economy was different now, how I got lucky in my generation and he was stuck renting in the city with a kid and a wife and no real path to ownership. He never mentioned that I paid for his wedding. He never mentioned the apartment deposit I covered, or the car loan I co-signed, or the 3 times I quietly fixed his mistakes at my own venues when he tried to help with events and botched the contracts. But I told myself that was what fathers did. You gave your kids a better start than you had. You helped them feel secure. And if signing over the deed to this house, the house I bought with money from 16-hour shifts and weekends I never got back, would make my son feel like a man, then I would do it. "Let me just get the paperwork," I said. I walked into the small office off the kitchen and pulled the folder from the desk drawer. Inside were the documents my lawyer, Owen Hartley, had prepared 2 weeks ago. Owen was careful. He always had been. We went back 20 years, and he knew every clause in every contract that held my business together. When I told him I wanted to transfer the house to Brend, Owen asked me 3 times if I was sure. Then he made me sit down and go through the whole structure. I remembered his voice. "Tanner, you can do this, but we are going to do it carefully. You are not just handing him a blank check." I did not read the details again that morning. I trusted Owen. I trusted that he had built in the things we talked about, things that would protect me if the situation ever changed. But I did not think the situation would change. Brend was my son. This was family. I brought the folder back to the table. Nora had her phone out, filming. "For the memories," she said, smiling in that way that was more about the screen than about the room. Brend slid the papers in front of me. "Just here, here, and here," he said, pointing with one finger while he held his coffee with the other. I signed. My hand was steady. I had signed 1,000 contracts in my life. Lease agreements, vendor deals, liquor board forms, and this felt like just another piece of paper. Except it was not. This was the deed to the house where I had planned to grow old, where I thought my grandson would visit me, where I imagined sitting on the porch in 20 years and watching the woods. "Done," I said. Brend took the papers, barely looked at them, and handed them to Nora. She set her phone down and smiled. "This is amazing," she said. "Thank you so much, Tanner. This really means a lot." I waited for Brend to say something. He looked at the papers, then looked at me. "Yeah," he said. "Thanks." That was it. No hug, no real gratitude. Just a shrug and a glance back at his phone. I stood up and started to clear the coffee cups. Brend leaned back in his chair and looked around the room like he was seeing it for the first time as the owner. "You know," he said slowly, "Nora and I were talking on the drive. This place could use a lot of work. New paint, new floors, maybe knock out that wall and open up the kitchen. It is got good bones, but it is pretty dated. I stopped moving. Dated? Yeah, I mean, no offense, Dad, but this is how people decorated in like 2005. We want to make it ours, you know? Nora nodded. We are thinking of doing a whole renovation series on social. People love that content. I put the cups in the sink and turned around. Brend was still staring at the walls, at the beams, at the furniture that I had chosen and paid for. Well, I said carefully, I am glad you have plans. I just want you to remember that this place took a lot of work to build. A lot of years. Brend looked at me then, and something in his face was different. Colder. Sure, he said. But it is ours now, so we will do what we want with it. The air in the room changed. Nora glanced between us, and I saw her smile flicker. Anyway, Brend said, standing up, we need to get going. We have people coming by later to look at some furniture options. But, Dad? Yeah? He pointed toward the front door. I think it is time for you to go. I stared at him. What? I mean, this is our house now. We need space to figure things out. And honestly... He paused, and I saw something almost like a smirk. I do not really want to see you here anymore. The words landed like stones. I looked at Nora, who was suddenly very interested in her phone. I looked back at Brend. You are serious? Yeah. He crossed his arms. Look, it is not personal. We just need to start fresh. You understand, right? This is a new chapter for us. I could not move. I stood there in the kitchen of the house I built, holding a dish towel, staring at my son as he told me to leave. Brend, I said quietly, I just signed this place over to you 10 minutes ago. And I appreciate that. But the paper is done. It is ours now. So, he gestured toward the door again. You should probably get your things and go. Nora finally looked up. We will call you later, okay? Once we get settled. I felt something crack inside my chest, but I did not let it show on my face. I folded the towel, set it on the counter, and walked past both of them without another word. I went upstairs, grabbed my overnight bag from the closet, and checked the dresser to make sure I had my wallet and keys. My hands were shaking, but I kept them moving. When I came back down, Brend was on his phone, texting. Nora was taking pictures of the living room from different angles. I walked to the front door. Neither of them looked at me. I stepped outside, and the screen door swung shut behind me. I heard the heavy inner door close a moment later. Then I heard the deadbolt click. I stood on the porch, suitcase in hand, staring at the driveway. My truck was parked beside Brend's SUV. The afternoon sun was warm, and the birds were still singing. Everything looked exactly the same as it had an hour ago. Except now, I was locked out of my own house. I walked to the truck, opened the door, and set the bag on the passenger seat. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a text from Owen. Let me know when it is done. We should talk soon. I sat in the driver's seat and stared at the house. Through the big front window, I could see Brend and Nora walking through the living room, pointing at things, already making plans. I started the engine and backed down the driveway. As I reached the road, I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. The front door was closed. The house looked peaceful. And my son, the new owner, had already forgotten I was ever there. I drove back to the city in silence. No radio, no phone calls. Just the hum of the highway and the pressure building behind my eyes that I refused to let turn into anything else. By the time I reached my office above the main venue, it was late afternoon. The place was mine. A small room with a desk, a couch, and a wall covered in framed photos and old event posters. I dropped my bag by the door and sat down hard in the chair. The photos stared back at me. There was one from the early days, 25 years ago, when I opened my first bar with a loan I barely qualified for. Another from the night we launched the event hall, back when Brend was 8 and fell asleep on a pile of coats in the back room while I was still cleaning up at 2 a.m. There was a picture of him at 16, standing behind the bar during a family birthday party, grinning like he owned the place even then. I had wanted him to own it, not the bar exactly, but the life that came with hard work, the pride of building something, the knowledge that you could take care of people. Instead, I taught him that I was easy to walk over. I leaned back and closed my eyes. The memories came whether I wanted them or not. There was the time Brend tried to help manage an event at the venue when he was 24. He double-booked 2 private parties in the same space, promised both clients things we could not deliver, and then disappeared when they showed up on the same night ready to fight. I spent 6 hours and $3,000 fixing that mess, comping food, moving one party to a partner location, apologizing until my voice went hoarse. Brend never apologized. He said I should have better systems so he would not make mistakes. There was the wedding 2 years later. Brend married Nora at a vineyard an hour north, and I paid for half of it because he said they were stretched thin. The bill came to $42,000. I wrote the check and smiled in all the photos. A week later, Brend posted on social media about how he and Nora made their dream day happen, with no mention of anyone's help. There was the apartment deposit in the city, the car loan I co-signed when his credit was not good enough, the 3 months I covered his rent when he was between projects. Every time, he had a reason. Every time I told myself it was temporary. Every time I believed that once he got stable, he would remember. But he did not remember. Or he did, and he just did not care. I opened my eyes and looked at the photo of 8-year-old Brend asleep on the coats. He looked so small. I remembered carrying him to the car that night, buckling him in, and driving home while he slept in the back seat. I remembered thinking that all of this, the long hours, the stress, the constant hustle, was worth it, because I was building something for him. Now he had taken the house and thrown me out like I was a stranger. My phone buzzed. I looked down. It was a text from Gabe, the manager at the main venue downstairs. "Boss, you back? Need to go over some vendor contracts when you have time?" I texted back, "Yeah, give me 20 minutes." I stood up and splashed cold water on my face in the small bathroom attached to the office. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a 58-year-old man who suddenly looked older. The lines around my eyes were deeper. My hair was more gray than I remembered. Brend was right about one thing. I was old school. I believed in loyalty. I believed in keeping your word. I believed that family meant something. Apparently, I was the only one. 20 minutes later, I met Gabe in the main event hall. The space was empty and quiet, lit only by the safety lights along the edges. The stage sat dark at the far end, and the bar gleamed under the dim overhead glow. This was my place. I knew every scratch on the floor, every burned-out bulb, every trick to fix the sound system when it cut out. Gabe leaned against the bar, a folder of contracts in his hand. He was 36, solid, reliable. He had been with me for 8 years, and I trusted him more than I trusted most family. "You look tired," he said. "Long day." He nodded slowly, studying my face. "You want to tell me about it, or you want to just work?" I almost said, "just work." But something stopped me. Maybe it was the weight of the whole day. Maybe it was the fact that Gabe had earned the right to know. "I signed the country house over to Brend this morning," I said. Gabe's eyebrows went up. "Okay, that is big. How did it go?" He kicked me out an hour later. The silence that followed was thick. Gabe set the folder down on the bar and stared at me. "He what?" Told me he did not want to see me there anymore. Locked the door behind me? Gabe shook his head slowly, his jaw tight. "Jesus, Tanner, I do not even know what to say. That is messed up." "Yeah, what are you going to do?" I picked up one of the contracts from the folder, scanned it without really reading it, and set it back down. "I do not know yet," I said, "but I am done pretending it is fine." Gabe nodded. "Good, because it is not fine, not even close." We spent the next hour going over vendor contracts and schedule conflicts for upcoming events. It felt good to focus on something I could control, something that had clear rules and clear answers. But every few minutes, my mind drifted back to the house, to Brend's face, to the sound of that deadbolt clicking shut. 2 days later, I was sitting in a family restaurant in the city, one of those mid-range chain places with too bright lighting and menus the size of phone books. I was there because Gabe insisted I eat something other than bar food, and because I needed to get out of my own head. I was halfway through a forgettable sandwich when I saw them. Brend and Nora walked in with a group of friends, laughing and loud. They took a big table near the windows, and the server rushed over to greet them like they were celebrities. Brend waved her off with a smile, already pulling out his phone to take pictures of the group. I was sitting in a corner booth with my back to the room. They had not seen me. I thought about leaving, but something kept me in my seat. I listened. "So, yeah," Brend was saying, loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. "We finally got the old man to sign it over. Took forever, but we made it happen." One of his friends, a guy I vaguely recognized from some party years ago, laughed. "Dude, that house is insane. I saw the pictures Nora posted. You are living the dream." "Right?" Brend leaned back in his chair. "It is about time, honestly. I have been waiting for him to stop acting like he needed to control everything. Now it is ours, and we can actually do something with it." Nora chimed in. "We are planning a full renovation. New kitchen, new floors, maybe even add a second deck. It is going to be amazing." Another friend, a woman with a sharp voice, asked, "What about your dad? Is he cool with all the changes?" Brend shrugged. Does not matter. It is not his house anymore. Honestly, I think he is just relieved. He is getting old, you know. Managing that place was probably too much for him. Someone laughed. Another person asked if Brend was going to rent it out. Maybe eventually, Brend said. Once we get it looking good, we could flip it or turn it into an Airbnb. That area is blowing up right now. We could make a fortune. My hands tightened around my coffee cup. I kept my eyes down, but I heard every word. The sharp-voiced woman asked, "Does he still come around?" "Who, my dad?" Brend laughed. "No, I told him it is probably better if he gives us space. You know, let us settle in. He still has his little bars and stuff in the city. He will be fine." Little bars, I repeated under my breath. The conversation moved on. They talked about vacations and cars and some new restaurant they wanted to try. Brend kept ordering drinks, kept laughing, kept performing for his audience. I finished my coffee, left cash on the table, and stood up. As I walked past their table toward the exit, I kept my head forward, but I heard Brend's voice one more time as I reached the door. "Once the paperwork fully clears, I will decide who steps foot on that property. It is our call now." One of his friends joked, "Maybe you should phase the old guy out completely. Fresh start, man." They all laughed. I pushed through the door and stepped into the parking lot. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a calendar reminder. Land office follow-up, next week. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I opened my messages and scrolled to Owen's name. I typed 3 words. "We need to talk." The small-town cafe near the country house smelled like burnt coffee and frying bacon. I sat in a booth by the window, watching the road, waiting for nothing in particular. It had been 4 days since Brend kicked me out, and I told myself I was just passing through the area, told myself I only stopped for a quick meal. That was a lie, but it was easier than admitting I did not know where else to go. The clerk behind the counter, a woman in her 50s who had worked there for years, smiled when I walked in. "Tanner, haven't seen you in a while. How's the house?" I forced a smile. "It's fine, just grabbing lunch." She poured me coffee without asking and set it down with a wink. "On the house. You still make the best tips whenever you're in here." I thanked her and sat down. The cafe was half full, mostly locals, and a few people passing through. I kept my head down and pretended to look at the menu even though I already knew what I wanted. Then I heard his voice. Brend was sitting 3 booths behind me with 2 of his friends, guys from the city who dressed like they were trying too hard. I had not seen him come in, but his voice carried across the whole room. "Yeah, man, I finally kicked the old man out," Brend said, laughing. "It was about time. He was acting like he still ran the place." One of the friends asked, "How'd he take it?" "Fine, I guess. What's he going to do? The house is mine now. It's in my name. He signed it over, so it's done." "Dude, that's cold," the other friend said, but he was laughing too. "What did you say to him?" "I just told him we needed space, and he needed to stop acting like he lived there. I changed the locks the next day. It's clean now. No more of his stuff everywhere." The first friend whistled low. "Man, I don't know if I could do that to my dad." "Why not?" Brend said. "Look, he had his time, he got to build his little empire, do his thing, whatever. Now it's my turn. And honestly, he should be grateful I even let him sign it over while he's still alive. Most people wait until their parents are gone to get anything." I kept my eyes on the menu. My hands were steady, but my chest felt tight. The conversation kept going. Brend talked about refinancing the house, maybe selling it in a few years when the market got even hotter. He talked about how much work the place needed and how his dad's old-fashioned taste was holding it back. He joked about starting a YouTube channel documenting the renovation. One of his friends asked, "What's Tanner going to do now?" "Who cares?" Brend said. "He's got his bars. He'll be fine. Honestly, I think he's just mad that he's not the center of attention anymore. He'll get over it." I finished my coffee and set the cup down carefully. The clerk came by to refill it, and I shook my head. "Just the check, please." She looked at me with a question in her eyes but did not ask. She brought the check, and I left a 20 on the table even though the bill was $8. As I stood up to leave, I finally glanced back at Brend's booth. He was mid-laugh, gesturing with his hands, playing to his audience. He did not see me. Or maybe he did and just did not care. I walked out into the bright afternoon sun and stood by my truck. The house was less than 2 miles away. I could see the turnoff from where I was standing. I told myself to leave, told myself to go back to the city and let it go. But my hands turned the wheel toward the country road, and a few minutes later I was pulling into the long gravel driveway. The house looked different. There was new furniture on the porch, sleek metal chairs that did not match the wood beams. A delivery truck was parked near the side door, and 2 workers were carrying boxes inside. I saw Nora standing on the front steps, directing them with her phone in one hand. I parked the truck and climbed out slowly. The gravel crunched under my boots, and Nora looked up. Her face shifted from confusion to something colder. "Tanner," she said, not moving from the steps. "What are you doing here?" "I left some tools in the shed," I said, keeping my voice level. "Thought I'd pick them up?" She glanced toward the backyard where the shed sat behind the house. "I don't think that's a good idea." "They're my tools." "Yeah, but—" She hesitated, then pulled out her phone and started recording. "Brend said you might try this." "Try what?" "Showing up unannounced, acting like you still have a right to be here." I stared at her. She kept the phone pointed at me, her face set in a practiced expression of concern. "I'm not trying anything," I said. "I just want my tools." "Brend," she called toward the house. A moment later, the front door opened and Brend stepped out. He looked at me, then at Nora, then back at me. His face hardened. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "Getting my tools." "No." He came down the steps and stood between me and the house. "You can't just show up like this. You're going to confuse people." "Confuse who?" "The neighbors, the delivery guys, everyone." He gestured around like there was an audience watching. "They might get the wrong idea if they see you acting like you still live here." I looked past him toward the backyard. Near the fence, I saw my old gardening tools piled in a trash heap. Rakes, shovels, the hand tiller I used for the vegetable beds. They were covered in dirt and tossed like garbage. "You threw my tools away." Brend shrugged. "We're cleaning up. We need space for new stuff." "Those were good tools." "They were old." I turned back to him. "Brend, this is my house." "No," he said, his voice dropping low. "It was your house. Now it's mine. The paper is signed. It's done. And you need to stop showing up here like you're confused about that." Nora was still recording. One of the delivery workers had stopped to watch. I felt the weight of eyes on me, felt the script Brend was writing in real time, the narrative where I was the confused old man who could not let go. "You should focus on your little bars in the city," Brend said. "That's your thing now. This," he gestured at the house, "this is ours, and if you keep showing up, we're going to have a problem." I looked at him for a long moment, looked at the face I used to see in the back room of my venue, asleep on a pile of coats, looked at the man who now stood in front of the house I built and told me I was trespassing. "Understood," I said quietly. Brend nodded. "Good. I'm glad we're on the same page." I walked back to my truck without another word. As I opened the door, I saw Nora lower her phone and smile at Brend like they had just won something. I started the engine and backed out of the driveway. In the rearview mirror, I saw them both standing on the porch, watching me leave. When I reached the main road, I pulled over and sat in the silence. My hands were shaking, not from anger, not from fear, from something else, something that felt like a switch flipping inside me. I reached into the glove box and pulled out the folder Owen had given me weeks ago, the one with all the original transaction documents. I had looked at it once, briefly, but I had not read it carefully. I had trusted that it was just paperwork. Now I opened it. The first page was the deed transfer. My name, Brend's name, the legal description of the property. Standard. But clipped to the second page was a yellow sticky note in Owen's handwriting. "Life estate retained. Reversion clause if conditions fail. Call me before you panic." I stared at the note. Then I reached into the cup holder and saw the small USB drive I had forgotten about, the one labeled with the house's parcel number. Owen had insisted on recording the signing meeting, just in case. At the time, I thought it was overkill. Now I was not so sure. I put the truck in gear and drove back toward the city. But this time, I was not running. I was planning. My apartment above the side street bar was small and plain. 1 bedroom, a narrow kitchen, a living room that doubled as my office when I needed to work late. I had bought it years ago as a backup, a place to crash when events ran past midnight or when I did not feel like driving an hour back to the country. Now it was home. I spread the paperwork across the kitchen table. Every envelope Owen had given me, every clause, every addendum. The pages covered the entire surface, official county forms, notarized signatures, legal descriptions written in dense paragraphs that most people would skim past without understanding. I started reading, really reading, the way I should have done 2 weeks ago. The deed transfer was real. My name was off the primary title and Brend's name was on. That part was clean and straightforward, a standard property transfer form that any county clerk would recognize. But underneath that simple transfer were 3 other documents, each one carefully worded and precisely structured. The first was a life estate reservation. In plain language, it meant I still had the legal right to live at the house for the rest of my life, even though Brend held the title. He could not evict me, could not deny me access, could not treat me like a tenant or a guest. The house was his on paper, but my right to be there was protected by law. The second was a reversion clause. If Brend tried to sell the property, refinance it, or remove my access without documented cause, the deed would automatically revert back to me. Owen had written it carefully. Any attempt to flip, lease, or leverage the house without my written consent would trigger the reversal. The property would return to my name as if the transfer had never happened. The third was a behavior agreement Brend had signed at the same meeting. He agreed to maintain a respectful relationship, to allow me full access to the property, and to consult me on any major decisions regarding the house. The language was clear: mutual respect, shared use, no unilateral changes. I remembered that moment now. Owen sliding the paper across the table at the signing meeting, Brend barely glancing at it, his eyes on his phone, scrawling his signature with one hand while texting with the other. Just family stuff, Owen had said. Standard protections for both parties. Brend had not cared. He was too focused on getting the deed in his name, too eager to post about it online, too convinced that the signing was the end of the story. He thought he was signing a thank you note. He was wrong. I sat back in my chair and stared at the documents spread across the table. The life estate meant Brend could not kick me out, but he already had. The reversion clause meant his plans to flip the house or refinance it would undo the transfer entirely, and he was already talking about doing exactly that. And the behavior agreement meant his public disrespect, his recorded statements, his deliberate cruelty were all violations I could document and prove. Every move he had made in the past 2 weeks had been a step toward losing everything he thought he had won. I picked up my phone and called Owen. He answered on the second ring. "Tanner, I was wondering when you would call." "I read the papers." "Good. What do you think?" "I think you built a trap." Owen laughed softly, a dry sound that held no humor. "I built options. Legal protections. Whether they become a trap depends entirely on what your son does next. Has he done anything?" "He kicked me out, changed the locks, told me not to come back, threw my tools in the trash, and he is talking openly about refinancing or selling within a few years." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I heard papers rustling, the sound of Owen pulling files from a drawer. "Do you have proof?" he asked. "I have recordings of him saying it in public. I have his wife filming me at the house when he told me to leave. I heard him at the cafe talking about flipping it fast, and I can get security footage from my venue where he bragged about taking over and pushing me out." "That is enough," Owen said, his voice calm and certain. "More than enough, actually. He violated the life estate by denying you access and changing the locks. He violated the behavior agreement with the public disrespect and the documented mistreatment. And if he is seriously pursuing a sale or refinance, he is in the process of triggering the reversion clause." I stared at the papers on the table, at my signature next to Brend's, at the county seal pressed into the bottom of each page. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Now you decide. You can let it go and walk away, or you can invoke the reversion. If you invoke it, the deed goes back into your name. He gets nothing. The house is yours again, legally and completely, as if the transfer never happened." "Just like that?" "Just like that. The legal structure is already built and registered with the county. We just need to file the reversion paperwork, provide documentation of the violations, and register it at the county land office. The system does the rest." I thought about Brend standing on the porch, pointing at the road, telling me he did not want to see me there anymore. I thought about him laughing with his friends at the cafe, talking about phasing me out and selling fast. I thought about my tools thrown in a trash pile like they were garbage. "I want to do it right," I said slowly. "No shortcuts, no tricks, no backdoor maneuvers. I want it done through the system, in public, where he can see exactly what happened and exactly why." "Understood. When do you want to move?" "Soon, but I need to gather everything first. I want the documentation to be perfect." Owen was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "Tanner, are you sure about this? This is your son, your only child. Once you do this, there is no going back." "I know who he is," I said, and he made his choice when he pointed at that door. "All right then," Owen said. "Let me know when you are ready." The next morning, I met Gabe at the main venue. The event hall was empty and quiet, with morning light coming through the high windows and casting long shadows across the polished floor. The stage sat dark at the far end, and the bar gleamed under the safety lights. I told him everything: the clauses, the violations, the reversion, the plan. He listened without interrupting, his face hardening as I explained each piece. When I finished, he set down the clipboard he had been holding and looked at me carefully. "So, you can take it back," he said. "Yes." "And you are going to?" "Yes." Gabe nodded slowly, his jaw tight. "Good. He deserves it. More than deserves it, honestly. What he did to you, that was not just disrespectful, that was cruel." I pulled out my phone and opened the security footage app. The venue had cameras everywhere, at the bar, in the hallways, near the main entrance, in the back offices. I scrolled back through the last few weeks and found what I needed. There was Brend at the bar 3 weeks ago, talking loudly to a group of friends about how the country house was basically his already, and how he was going to modernize it and cash out. The timestamp was clear, and the audio was clean. There was another clip from 2 weeks ago where he joked to a staff member that his dad was too sentimental about old things and needed to get out of the way so real progress could happen. And there was the footage from last week, right before the signing, where Brend stood in the parking lot talking to someone on the phone, saying he was going to lock it down and move fast before the old man changes his mind or tries to add more conditions. I saved all of it to a separate drive and labeled each file with dates and descriptions. Gabe watched over my shoulder. "You want me to pull anything else? Text messages, emails, anything he sent to the staff group?" "Yes. Anything where he talks about the house or about me, anything that shows intent." Gabe nodded and pulled out his phone. "Give me an hour. I know he sent some messages to the group chat bragging about the place. I will find them." I spent the rest of the morning organizing everything into a single folder. The audio recording from the cafe where Brend talked about kicking me out. The video Nora took at the house when she filmed me being turned away. The security footage from the venue. The bank statement showing Brend had already contacted a mortgage broker about refinancing options. By noon, I had a clean timeline of every violation, complete with dates, times, and supporting evidence. Gabe came back with his phone and a printed document. Found the messages. He sent 3 different ones to the staff group, one about finally getting control of the family assets, one about how the old generation needs to step aside, and one where he joked about turning the house into a rental property. I read through the printouts. Each message was time-stamped and included reactions from other staff members, some laughing emojis, some uncomfortable silences. "This is perfect," I said. "Thank you." Gabe hesitated, then put a hand on my shoulder. "Tanner, I have worked for you for 8 years. I have seen how you treat people. You are fair. You are honest. You do not play games. If you are doing this, it is because he left you no choice." "He left me no choice," I repeated. That afternoon, I drove to the bank. The same branch where I had held accounts for 20 years, where I had taken out the original mortgage for the country house, where the manager knew my name and my history. I sat down across from her desk and explained the situation. I kept my voice calm and factual, laying out the timeline without emotion. She listened carefully, her expression neutral but attentive. After a few minutes, she pulled up my account files on her computer and scrolled through the notes. "I see the annotations here," she said. "The mortgage is still in your name, with you listed as the primary responsible party. The deed transfer was recorded with special conditions flagged in our system. If your son tries to refinance or modify the loan, he will need your written signature and approval, and if he tries to proceed without it..." "It triggers the reversion clause," I finished. "Exactly." She looked at me over her reading glasses. "Mr. Josman, I am not supposed to give legal advice, but you should speak with your lawyer about this situation, and you should do it soon." "I already am." She nodded and made a note in the file. "If we receive any applications or inquiries from your son regarding this property, we will hold them pending your approval. Does that work for you?" "That works." As I stood to leave, she handed me a printout of the recent account activity. At the bottom was a flagged inquiry from 3 days ago. Brend had called the bank asking about refinancing options, current rates, and how quickly they could process an application. "He is moving faster than you think," she said quietly. "You should move faster too." I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. Not fast enough? That evening, I sat in Owen's office on the 4th floor of a building downtown. His space was exactly what you would expect from a lawyer who had practiced for 30 years. Dark wood furniture, shelves lined with legal texts, and a large desk covered with organized files. He had the folder open in front of him, reviewing every document, every recording, every screenshot. He made notes on his pad, his face calm and focused. After 20 minutes, he looked up. "This is airtight," he said. "He violated the life estate, the behavior agreement, and he is triggering the reversion clause. Anyone would be enough. All 3 together, there is no question." "So we can move forward?" "We can. Once we file, The county reviews it in 3 business days. Then it goes to the recorder. We could have the new deed registered by next week. I want to be there when it happens. Owen looked at me carefully. You want to be there when he finds out? Yes, I want him to hear it from the county. I want him to see the system tell him no. Owen smiled slightly. All right, I will set up a meeting at the land office. He will come thinking it is administrative. Instead, he learns the truth. Clara adjusted her glasses and pulled the first document from the folder. She set it on the table facing Brend and Nora, then folded her hands. This is a county land title meeting to address a recorded property reversion, she said. The property in question is the country house at 4725 Ridgemont Road, parcel number 58-403-1012. Brend leaned forward. Right, my house. What is the problem? Clara pulled out the second document, a copy of the original deed transfer. On November 27th, Tanner Josman executed a conditional transfer of the property to Brend Josman. The deed was recorded with 3 attached agreements, a life estate, a reversion clause, and a behavior contract. Brend glanced at the papers. Yeah, I signed all that. It was just formality stuff. It was not, Owen said quietly. Clara continued. The life estate granted Tanner Josman the right to reside at the property for the remainder of his life. The reversion clause specified that any attempt to sell, refinance, or deny access would result in automatic reversion. The behavior agreement required respectful treatment and consultation on major decisions. Nora looked at Brend. What is she talking about? Brend waved a hand. The house is mine. I have the deed. Clara pulled out a timeline with dates and descriptions. On November 27th, 1 hour after signing, you verbally evicted Tanner Josman. You changed the locks the next day. On November 29th, you were recorded stating your intention to refinance or sell. On December 1st, you physically denied Tanner Josman access and had your wife record the encounter. On December 2nd, you contacted a mortgage broker without Tanner Josman's consent. The room went silent. Brend stared at the timeline. His face had gone pale. Each of these actions, Clara said, constitutes a violation of the signed agreements. Individually, any one would be sufficient grounds for reversion. Collectively, they leave no legal ambiguity. Wait, Brend said, his voice rising. What are you saying? Clara pulled out the final document, a freshly printed deed with the county seal. This morning at 9 a.m., the county recorder finalized the reversion. The property at 4725 Ridgemont Road is now recorded solely in the name of Tanner Josman. The conditional transfer to Brend Josman has been revoked. She slid the deed across the table. Brend grabbed it and stared at the name. His name was gone. Mine was there, clean and official. No, he said. This is wrong. I own that house. He gave it to me. He transferred it conditionally, Owen said. You violated the conditions. The transfer is void. Brend turned to me, his face twisted. You planned this. You set me up. I gave you a house, I said quietly. You threw me out of it. We were setting boundaries. You were being difficult. I was being respectful, I said. You were not. Nora looked up from her phone. It is true. The property app just updated. Your name is on it, Tanner, not ours. Brend stood up fast, his chair scraping backward. This is insane. You cannot just take it back. I will get a lawyer. You can try, Owen said. But the deed is recorded. The county reviewed everything and found the reversion valid. You signed the agreement. You violated it. This is state law. Brend looked at Clara. You are just going to let this happen? Mr. Josman, Clara said, her tone still level, I do not let anything happen. I process legal documents according to state regulations. Everything filed was lawful and properly executed. If you believe there was an error, you may petition for review, but I assure you the recording is correct. Brend stared at her, then at the deed, then at me. His hands were shaking. You are really doing this. You took it first, I said. You just did not realize what you were taking. Nora stood and put a hand on Brend's arm. We need to go. We need to call someone. Brend pulled away. No, I am not leaving until... There is nothing left to discuss, Owen said. The deed is recorded. Tanner is the legal owner. You are no longer on the title. Brend looked at me one last time. His face was red, his jaw tight. This is not over. Yes, I said. It is. He turned and walked out, Nora following. Through the glass wall, I watched them cross the lobby. Brend was talking fast, gesturing wildly. Nora was typing on her phone. The door swung shut behind them. Clara gathered the papers and put them back in the folder. She handed me the official copy of the deed. Congratulations, Mr. Jossman. The property is yours. I took the deed and looked at it. My name, my house. Thank you, I said. Owen shook Clara's hand. Appreciate your help. Just doing my job, she said. Then she looked at me. For what it is worth, I have been doing this for 20 years. I have seen many family disputes. You did this the right way. No tricks. Just the law. I nodded. That is all I wanted. Owen and I left the land office and walked to his car. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the parking lot. I felt lighter than I had in weeks, as if a weight I had been carrying had finally been lifted from my shoulders. You want to go straight to the house? Owen asked as we got in. Yes, I said, holding the deed in my lap. I want to go home. The drive took 40 minutes. Owen played quiet music on the radio, something instrumental that filled the silence without demanding attention. We did not talk much. There was nothing left to say. The paperwork had done all the talking. When we turned onto the gravel driveway, I saw Brend's SUV parked near the front door at an awkward angle, one tire on the grass. He was standing on the porch, phone pressed to his ear, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. Nora sat in the car with the door open, her head in her hands, her shoulders shaking. Owen parked behind the SUV. We got out. Brend stopped pacing when he saw us. He ended his call and shoved the phone in his pocket. You cannot be serious. You are really going to kick me out? You kicked me out, I said calmly. Now I am taking my house back. This is my house. I was going to... We had plans... His voice was rising, tinged with panic. You had plans to sell it, I said, or flip it, or turn it into an Airbnb. You said so yourself. Multiple times. In public. Brend opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at Owen desperately. Tell him he cannot do this. There has to be something, some way to fight this. He already did it, Owen said, his voice flat and professional. The deed is recorded with the county. This property belongs to Tanner. You need to leave. I am not leaving. This is insane. I walked past him to the front door. I pulled out my keys, the original set I had kept hidden, the one Brend did not know existed, and unlocked the door with a smooth turn. Brend grabbed my arm roughly. Do not. I looked at his hand on my arm, then slowly raised my eyes to his face. Let go. He hesitated, his grip loosening, then released me completely. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The house was different. New furniture that did not match the space. New paint and colors I would never have chosen. Everything rearranged to suit someone else's vision. But underneath all of that, it was still mine. The beams in the ceiling that I helped install. The floor I had chosen and paid for. The windows that looked out over the woods I had walked through 1,000 times. I walked through the living room slowly, then the kitchen, then the hallways. Brend and Nora followed me, their voices rising and falling as they argued and pleaded and threatened, but I did not stop. I did not respond. I just kept walking, reclaiming each room with my presence. When I reached the back porch, I stopped and looked out at the yard. The grass needed cutting, the garden beds were overgrown with weeds, the fence needed a fresh coat of paint. But it was quiet and peaceful, and it was home. I turned back to Brend. You have 1 hour to get your things and leave, I said. After that, you are trespassing on my property. Brend stared at me, his face a mixture of disbelief and rage. You are really going to do this. To your own son. You did it first, I said. I am just finishing what you started. Nora stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. Where are we supposed to go? We do not have anywhere. I do not know, I said. But it is not here, not anymore. They left 25 minutes later. Brend shoved things into boxes and trash bags with harsh, aggressive motions, muttering under his breath the whole time. Nora cried quietly as she packed her clothes into a suitcase, her hands shaking. Neither of them looked at me. When they were done, Brend stood by the door with a bag in each hand and fury in his eyes. I will never forgive you for this, he said, his voice low and venomous. I know, I said. You are going to regret this. I promise you that. Maybe, I said. But right now, I do not. He walked out, and Nora followed quickly behind him. I watched through the window as they loaded the SUV in silence, slamming doors and tossing bags. When they finally drove away, gravel kicked up behind the tires in angry clouds of dust. Owen came up beside me and stood quietly for a moment. You all right? Yes, I said. I am all right. He handed me a folder. New keys are being made. I will have them delivered by tomorrow morning. And I flagged the property with the county recorder. No one can file anything against it without your direct written approval. You are protected. Thank you, Owen, for everything. He nodded and put a hand on my shoulder. You did good, Tanner. You stood up for yourself when it mattered. A lot of people would not have had the courage. After Owen left, I walked through the house slowly, room by room. I opened every window to let fresh air chase out the tension. I turned on lights in every room. I made coffee in my old coffee maker, which Brend had left shoved in the back of a cabinet, probably forgotten. As the sun set, I sat on the front porch with my coffee and looked out at the driveway. My truck was parked where it belonged. The house was quiet behind me. The woods were turning dark, and the first stars were beginning to appear. My phone buzzed. It was the group text Brend had sent days ago about the housewarming party. Someone had replied, asking for the address and what time to arrive. I deleted the entire conversation. Then I leaned back in the chair, sipped my coffee, and allowed myself a small smile. The house was mine again. And this time, no one was taking it away. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed. Sunlight came through the windows I had opened the night before, and I could hear birds singing in the trees outside. For the first time in 2 weeks, I felt truly rested. The knot of tension that had been living in my chest had finally loosened. I made breakfast in the kitchen, scrambled eggs, toast with butter, fresh coffee, and ate slowly at the dining table. The same table where Brend had signed the papers. The same table where everything had started to fall apart. But now it was just mine, and the memory had less power over me. Around 10 o'clock, a courier arrived with a package from Owen's office. Inside were 3 sets of new keys, each one tagged with a small label indicating which lock it opened. I tested them methodically in every door, front, back, side entrance, shed, garage. They all worked perfectly. I gathered up the old keys that Brend had changed and dropped them in a drawer in the kitchen. Then I changed the code on the security system and called the alarm company to update the contact information. Everything now pointed back to me. Gabe called around noon, his voice cautious. How did it go yesterday? He asked. It is done. The house is mine again. There was a pause, then relief in his voice. Good. That is really good, Tanner. You coming back to the city anytime soon? Not for a few days. I need to settle in first. Make the place feel like mine again. Take all the time you need, boss. You earned it. We have got everything covered here. After we hung up, I changed into work clothes and spent the afternoon outside. The grass was long and uneven, so I found the old mower in the shed, covered in dust but still functional, and spent 2 hours cutting the entire yard. The repetitive motion was meditative, and the smell of fresh-cut grass filled the air. The garden beds were choked with weeds, so I pulled them out one by one, clearing space for new plants in the spring. My hands got dirty, my back started to ache, but my mind was clearer than it had been in weeks. By evening, the yard looked better. Not perfect, but better. A work in progress, like everything else in my life. I showered, changed into clean clothes, and sat on the back patio with a cold drink. The sun was setting over the trees, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The air was cool and still, and I could hear the distant sound of crickets beginning their evening song. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is not over. You will regret this. I promise you that. I stared at the message for a moment. The words were meant to frighten me, to make me second-guess what I had done. It was from Brend, using a number I did not recognize. Probably a friend's phone or a burner number. I blocked it and put the phone face down on the table. Let him be angry. Let him make threats. Let him rage against what had happened. It did not change the facts. The deed was in my name. The house was mine. And the law was firmly on my side. I finished my drink and went inside. The house was quiet and warm, filled with the comfortable silence of a place that truly belongs to you. I walked through each room one more time, turning off lights, checking locks, making sure everything was secure. In the living room, I stopped in front of the fireplace. Above it was a framed photo of Brend as a boy, maybe 8 years old, sitting on these same porch steps with a big gap-toothed smile. He looked so happy, so innocent. I took the photo down carefully and placed it in a drawer, not to forget him or pretend he had never existed, just to move forward without that particular reminder staring at me every day. Then I went to bed early, in my own house, on my own terms, and slept better than I had in months. Saturday morning arrived bright and clear. I woke early, made coffee on the front porch, and sat watching the driveway and the road beyond. The air was crisp, and everything felt new. Around 11:30, I heard a car coming up the road, then another, then a third. I remembered the group text, the housewarming party Brend had scheduled for today, the invitation he had sent to 20 people before everything fell apart. The first car turned into my driveway and stopped near the house. It was a newer sedan, expensive looking. 2 people got out, a man about Brend's age and a woman carrying a bottle of wine. They looked around, confused, probably wondering where Brend's SUV was. I stayed on the porch, coffee in hand, and watched. The man walked toward me, checking his phone. "Hey, excuse me, is this 4725 Ridgemont Road?" "It is," I said. "We are here for Brend and Nora's housewarming party. Are they inside?" "No, Brend does not live here anymore." The man frowned, his confusion deepening. "What? He sent out invitations yesterday. He said 2 o'clock today." "Things changed," I said calmly. "The house is mine. The party is canceled." He stared at me for a long moment, then pulled out his phone and made a call. After a few seconds of listening, he shook his head, said something I could not hear, and hung up. He turned to the woman, spoke quietly, and they both got back in their car and drove away. Over the next hour, 3 more cars arrived. Same questions, same answers. Each time, the visitors looked confused or annoyed or embarrassed. Each time, they left quickly after a brief phone call. By 1:30, no one else had come. Word must have spread through the group chat. Party canceled, house under new management. I spent the rest of the afternoon on the porch, reading a book I had not touched in months. An old mystery novel I had bought years ago and never finished. The sun was warm on my face, the air was clean, and the house was quiet behind me. It felt good to just sit and read without tension, without waiting for the other shoe to drop. Around 5 o'clock, my phone rang. It was Owen. "Just checking in," he said. "Everything okay out there?" "Everything is fine. Peaceful, actually." "Good. I heard through the grapevine that Brend tried to show up at my office this morning, demanding to see me. My assistant turned him away." "What did he want?" "To contest the reversion, most likely, to find some loophole or procedural error. But there is not one. The recording is clean, the violations are documented, and the law is clear." "So it is really over?" "It is really over," Owen confirmed. "He can make noise, he can hire a lawyer, but he will lose. The deed is yours, Tanner, permanently." We talked for a few more minutes about property insurance and utility transfers, making sure everything was properly documented and transferred back into my name. Then we said goodbye. As the sun began to set, I walked through the house one more time. Every room was mine. Every corner held a memory that I had built with my own hands and my own money. Not stolen, not manipulated, earned. I stood in the living room and looked out the big front window. The driveway was empty, the road was quiet, the woods were turning dark. My phone buzzed one more time, another text from another blocked number. I did not even read it. I just turned the phone off completely and set it on the table. Then I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a drink, and returned to my favorite chair in the living room. The house was mine. The fight was over, and I had won. Sunday morning came quietly. I woke without an alarm, made breakfast, and spent the early hours on the back patio, watching the sunrise paint the sky in soft colors. There was no urgency, no plans, no one to answer to, just peace. I spent the day doing small projects around the house. I fixed a leaky faucet in the bathroom that had been dripping for months. I tightened the screws on cabinet doors that had come loose. I replaced a burned-out bulb in the hallway and swept the front porch clean of leaves and dirt. These were the kinds of tasks Brend would have called beneath him, the kind of work he would have hired someone else to do, spending money unnecessarily just to avoid getting his hands dirty. But I found satisfaction in them. Each repair made the house feel more like mine again. Around noon, I drove into town and bought groceries. Real food, not just the quick meals I had been surviving on. Fresh vegetables, good bread, meat for the grill. I planned to cook a proper dinner for myself that evening, something I had not done in weeks. On the drive back, I passed the small cafe where I had overheard Brend bragging to his friends. The clerk was outside sweeping the sidewalk. She waved when she saw my truck, and I waved back. Life was already returning to normal. That evening, I grilled a steak on the back patio and ate dinner as the sun set. The meat was perfectly cooked, the vegetables were fresh, and the cold drink in my hand tasted better than anything I had consumed in recent memory. I was eating in my own home, at my own table, with no one to judge or criticize or demand anything from me. After dinner, I sat in the living room with the lights low and thought about everything that had happened. The signing, the betrayal, the discovery of the clauses, the reversion, the confrontation at the land office, Brend and Nora leaving with their bags and their anger. I did not feel guilt, I did not feel regret, I felt relief, and beneath that, something deeper, a quiet satisfaction that came from standing up for myself, from refusing to be walked over, from using the law exactly as it was meant to be used. My son had made his choices. He had chosen cruelty over kindness, greed over gratitude, and image over integrity. Those were his decisions, and he would live with the consequences. I had made my choices too, and I would live with mine. Around 9 o'clock, I heard a car coming slowly up the road. My body tensed for a moment, old instincts kicking in, but the car passed by without stopping. Just someone heading home after a long day. I got up and walked through the house one final time, turning off lights, checking that all the doors were locked. In the kitchen, I washed my dinner dishes by hand, taking my time, enjoying the simple rhythm of warm water and soap. When I finally returned to the living room, I poured myself one last drink and sat down in my favorite chair. The house was completely silent, except for the distant sound of wind moving through the trees outside. I thought about calling someone, Gabe, maybe, or Owen, just to talk, just to share the moment. But I decided against it. This moment was mine alone. This victory was personal. My phone sat on the table, still turned off from yesterday. I had no desire to turn it back on tonight. Whatever messages were waiting could wait until tomorrow, or the day after, or never. I raised my glass slightly, a silent toast to myself, to the house, to the future. Then I drank, set the glass down, and smiled. The house was mine. The deed was recorded. The law had spoken. And my son had finally learned that some things cannot be taken, only given and only lost through your own actions. I leaned back in the chair, closed my eyes, and let the satisfaction wash over me like warm water. This was home. This was victory. This was justice. And it felt exactly right.